What's up, guys? Here we are, another episode, Gospel of Fire, Oxford grad, leadership consultant, Timothy Clark. How are you, Tim?
Hey, I'm doing great, Elliot. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming on. No coronavirus for you yet?
No, we're staying out of it. We're staying out of it so far. We'll see how long that lasts.
Yeah, I think we might all just get it, or maybe we've all had it already. Who knows, right?
That's right. That's right. It's going to sweep through in some way or form, and that's just what happens. So hopefully the strain is mild and we're okay.
Yeah. How do you think? So you like to talk about these 4 strategies of psychological safety, right? Like, how do you, like, this is such a hot topic right now with the coronavirus. There's people freaking out, right? Because they feel so unsafe. Mm-hmm. Right? Like that. I mean, that's where a lot of the freak out. I mean, when you say like when we feel unsafe, we start to lose it. So, here we are with Corona.
So that's a good point, Elliot. Let's talk about that a little bit. What happens is that when people feel, and this is what the research says on both the physical side and the emotional and psychological side, when people feel unsafe, they generally change their behavior. And that's where we get into trouble. And that's probably what we need to talk about. And that's probably what your listeners really need to hear about. And so we need to assess ourselves. So when we feel unsafe, how are we changing our behavior? And are we changing our behavior in a way that it's not helpful to those with whom we're interacting? Is it harmful? Are we taking counsel from our fears? Because when we do, we're not at our best. And that's really the important point, is how is it changing our behavior? And are we changing it in ways that are not good, that are harmful, that create adverse consequences? So we can reflect on that.
Yeah, we're going to, that's like, look, the coronavirus, like we said, it's going to come and go, but what it's doing is playing on our fear, right?
Yes.
It's totally playing on our fear. And then what you just said, like reflecting on your fears, it made me think about something. I was watching a basketball game with my kid last night because he's all about basketball, and the coach was just screaming at the players. Mm-hmm. And like, that's something that's so interesting to me too, because I'm a coach and I so rarely try to scream, because when you elicit that fear response or that anger response in an athlete, it might work for a second, but it's going to die.
Right. So here's what we know, and this is based on the research. When you use fear, when you push the fear button as a leader, as a coach, as a parent, as a boss at work, it triggers what we call the self-censoring instinct. And we all have one of those. Every human has a self-censoring instinct. And so what do? So the self-censoring instincts means that we are then going to censor ourselves because we don't feel safe. And so what do? We retreat into a mode of managing personal risk. Well, if you retreat and retrench into a mode of managing personal risk, you're not going to be performing at your best. There's no way. You can't do that. And so that's why it's not possible. And so that's why this becomes dangerous. There are some now, I know you're a world-class athlete. I was a college football player. When I had some coaches that we would classify as screamers. So I had a couple of coaches that were in the screamer category. In the short term, that will elicit a response, and you'll get athletes to respond to that, right? They'll get fired up. But it's actually a fear-based tactic. So what happens is you may see an initial response of performance and effort, but in the long term, it's not sustainable, because fear is not a tool that is able to elicit high performance and sustain it. It doesn't happen. It can't happen. And we know that.
I'm going to ask a personal question about me, and I want to hear your opinion about it.
Sure.
So in my last fight that I ever had, right, I was sitting on the stool, and my coach came over to me. It's between the second and the third round. and I'm fighting the best, probably maybe the best opponent that I've ever fought, you know? Yeah. And my coach looks at me and he goes, and my nickname was Fire Marshal. He always called me Fire Marshal. He goes, all right, Fire Marshal, this is probably it. This could be it for you for, you know, so what is it that you've got? Can you show me what it is that you have in you and give me one good round? Okay. And I went out there and I beat the fucking I have never fought so well in my entire life as I did in that 5 minutes. And there was no yelling and there was no screaming and there was no, let's go, motherfucker. There was none of that. So what allowed me to be so, and I felt a sense of calmness. I was like, oh, all right, here we go. What, like psychologically, like from the facts, not just from like what I think. What was going on there?
So I think what was going on there is that to perform at your best, you need controlled intensity. You need composure. You need poise. So fear or anger. So let's think about it from an emotional standpoint, right? So psychologists have a term they call emotional hijacking or emotional flooding. That means that the balance between your thinking brain and your feeling brain is out of balance. It's out of balance, and you're being controlled more by your emotions rather than your thinking, or it's out of balance. And so you've been hijacked. You've had an emotional flooding event. Now we know that neurochemically that the body helps us in times of crisis and in times of fear when we need to respond and react. But what if you need sustained performance? So Elliot, what you needed in that last round, how long's a round?
5 minutes.
5 minutes. You needed sustained performance for 5 minutes. You can't do that if you're in a flight or fright or fight mode and you are fueled solely by an emotional response. You need controlled intensity. You need to be able to concentrate. You need composure. You need poise. If you're going 5 minutes, that's what you need. Now, if you need just a very quick response.
Car off my child, man. I need
that's different.
Everything. Right,
that's different. Yeah,
I can be tired as hell at the end of that, right?
That's right. That's right. But if you need sustained high performance, then that's more than an adrenaline rush. That's more than a hit of neurochemicals. You need to be able to sustain that performance. So if you are a leader or a coach or a parent or a friend, then you're trying to nurture that in others, because we know that that's how we're able to perform over time. And isn't that what we're interested in? We're interested in sustainable high performance over time.
Yeah, it's so, I mean, that's all that really, for me personally, you know, I can only talk about it from my perspective. Yeah, that's all I want. I want to be able to perform at a really high level all the time.
Right.
You know, like, because I like to, I'm a chaser, and I'm sure a lot of the listeners here are chasers. Like, they like to get after it.
Yeah.
You know, so what are some of the steps that we can take to do that?
So in order to do that, so let's just talk about the emotional intelligence side of this. Yeah. In order to do this, what we find is that the people that perform the best over time are the people that have developed self-mastery. They've developed impulse control. Their emotions do not run them. They control and manage and regulate their emotions. Now, some people, they still don't understand this. And so we still glorify and lionize kind of outbursts of emotion sometimes. Completely wrong. It's completely wrong. The people that perform well and are able to sustain that are the people that they've developed self-mastery and self-regulation and self-management. So that ability to control impulses and to be in charge, it's master or slave relationship with our emotions. We need to become master. And then we're able to do the most good for those around us as well, because we can control ourselves, especially when the stakes are high and the margin of error is low and the intensity is sometimes just, it's overwhelming. In a pressurized situation, we need people that we can count on.
I read this book, Stillness, by Ryan Holiday, and it's about Stoicism. It's a Stoic philosophy, but I don't like to say, I mean, it's a Stoic philosophy, but it's in every philosophy. It's in every religion. It's in every doctrine of faith, like this idea of what you're talking about, you know? And he was talking about the Cuban Missile Crisis with JFK.
Right.
You know, and he was just describing the story of how JFK, for many of his other flaws, you know, in this instance, in these types of instances, he was able to do exactly what you were saying. He was able to not overreact. He was able to not, and the people around him, he was able to not just go, fuck it, we're going. Here it go, you know, like it's over. And just stay real calm and have clear thought to avoid like a massive crisis. So it's such an interesting concept, right?
Yeah, it is. And it's important for us. We may not be in positions of great power. We may not have scalable influence, but we all have profound influence on the people around us, our families, our children, our neighbors, our friends. We have a profound effect. And so it's not about, it doesn't mean it's more important because you may have scalable influence. It's just as important for the one as for the many. And so our behavior, the way that we influence and interact with people is massively important.
Man, it's so interesting. You're the second person that's told me this in 2 weeks.
Is that right?
Yeah, I got to meet with somebody about my, he's my friend's friend, and he jumped on Tim Ferriss's podcast and grew Tim Ferriss's podcast from 900,000 downloads a month to 14 million. And then he helped Jocko start his podcast and get it going and off the ground. And now he's like the COO of LeBron and Arnold's supplement company, you know? And we were talking, and he was like, we talked for an hour, and he was like, well, what do you want? I was like, well, man, I want influence. Like I want to change people's lives. That's what I really, really want. And he's like, well, how are you going about that? And we like went about it, my podcast and my Instagram, and I was like, well, when I get to 100,000, and he's like, hey, how about you just start with one? And I was like, huh? It was, like, he was like, I was like, what? He's like, yeah, just start with one. And it's the same thing you're saying.
First step.
Influence one person, make one person's life better. How do you, where did you come up with that idea?
Well, so this goes back to the topic of my new book, Psychological Safety, the 4 stages of psychological safety. So let me give you a definition for this. Psychological safety is a topic that's been in the research now for a few years, but a basic definition would be that it's not expensive to be yourself. It's not expensive. It's not expensive emotionally, psychologically, politically, economically, socially, to be yourself. And what we're saying is that we owe that to each other. So the first stage of psychological safety is what we call inclusion safety. That means that we include each other. And we include each other on the basis of what? It's on the basis of our inherent worth as human beings. So we're not talking about worthiness. We're talking about worth. Worth precedes worthiness. Sometimes people get this wrong. When they get it wrong, it creates all kinds of problems. And so that's why we run our societies, we run our organizations, we often run our teams, our families on false theories of superiority. So think about all of the justifications that we have to say that I'm better than you are.
God. Yeah.
Okay, I'm better. So I just worked with a big group of leaders, and I said, what are the ways that we justify superiority? Money, education, job, title, position,
physical prowess,
authority, physical prowess. You're a better athlete. You live in a better neighborhood. you're a better race or ethnicity. You're a better gender. You're taller. You're better looking. You got better hair than I do. Although you and I are pretty similar in that regard.
We're the same, man.
Hey,
we're the same.
But the point is, we have run our societies through all the ages of time on what I call junk theories of superiority. That's all rubbish. There is no legitimate basis to say that you're superior to so-and-so, that I'm superior to. It's all rubbish. And it's so incredible because we continue to perpetuate these junk theories of superiority. And we need to clear the decks of those, because when we do, we see the truth that we are inherently priceless individuals, and that we should invite each other into our respective societies simply because we possess flesh and blood. There's no other requirement.
There's no other requirement.
There's no other requirement. The only justification that we have for excluding each other, the only justification, is when we threaten each other with harm. Then there's a justification. But you know what? We can handle that. And so the respect and the civility and the courtesy that we owe each other is based on membership in the same human family. It's not that complicated, but we make it so complicated.
We make it so complicated. I just got done reading this book by this Buddhist lady named Pema Chodron. It's called Welcoming the Unwelcome. And it was talking about this very concept, because I struggle from this, man. I struggle from this not good enough syndrome, like that I am not good enough, because that was an early part of my life. And I have not gotten rid of it. And it was like, look, you are good enough. Every single creature is good enough just based on the fact that you are here.
That's right.
That's right. Just that you are here and we are part of this life experience together.
That's right.
Look, we're about to go into this political season, man, where you're going to have these two 70-year-old dudes getting up on the stage screaming at each other, about, right? Like, and going the exact opposite of what we're talking about. And I don't care. It looks like it's going to be Joe Biden for the Democrats, right?
Yeah.
But I don't care if you're going to vote for Biden or vote for Trump. They're both going to do the same exact thing. So how is it that we got here, that we're electing leaders that lead very poorly?
We have allowed ourselves to leave our civility, to leave the mutual respect that we owe each other. So think about the nature of civic discourse today.
Yeah.
It's filled with personal attacks. Personal attacks are out of bounds, right? We should be debating issues in a dignified way, debating issues on their merits. But we should maintain a sense of dignity, decorum, civility, and respect in all of these discussions. If we've lost the ability to disagree. And if we don't teach each other and teach our children how to disagree, we're in trouble as a species. This is not good. And it's not acceptable. It really is not acceptable.
Can we talk about a specific subject for a second on things, something like and we'll stay on like the political realm, of social issues, that people will disagree on and then just crucify the other person.
Right.
Right. Things like 1, gay marriage, and then 2, abortion. Right. Like these are just such hot topics politically.
They are.
Where it's like, look, okay, you're a sinner and going to hell for if you are gay and and going to get married. And then the other side's like, you piece of shit, how could you say that I'm going to hell? Right. Like how did and look, I tend to fall on more of the like, man, what do you care if somebody is gay and gets married? Like, it's not for me and it's not for you. how do we have so much hate around something that it shouldn't be that hateful?
That's right. So again, here's the issue. So it is true, and it will always be true, that we have deep divisions, deep divides, deep ideological, philosophical, religious differences on these issues, social issues, economic issues. What's the role of government in these things? We've always had differences. The point is we are vilifying and we are demonizing each other because we're not learning how to handle the differences. The differences are going to remain. So we don't even need to talk about policy stances or moral stances on these issues. Let's just talk about the way that we're engaging as brothers and sisters. This is the problem. Even if you have deep differences with someone, you still should be able to manage the differences. And how do you manage the differences? By maintaining the respect and the dignity. And that's, and this goes back to the psychological safety that we owe each other. So regardless of the differences, right? I'll give you an example from the book, Elliot, that's quite interesting.
Yeah.
So in graduate school, I studied, for my master's degree, I studied economics and I studied government. And I had a class with an economics professor, and he was radical. He was way out there, at least compared to me. So I knew going in that his views were very, very different than my own. And so I braced myself for combat. I thought, how are we going to do this?
Mm-hmm.
And as it turns out, he and I both maintained a great deal of respect and appreciation for others, for each other. Did we have big differences in our points of view? Yes, we did. But we maintained the friendship in spite of the differences. And that's what we have to do. This goes back to, this is like Ruth Bader Ginsburg and Antonin Scalia on the Supreme Court. Very, very different in terms of judicial philosophy. And yet they were able to maintain a warm, trusting friendship and relationship. We have to be able to do that.
We're going to get a little hot topic if that's okay, right? Because I think sometimes where a lot of these major differences come up are like in religions, right? Like when you start to touch a religious area, like for example, like the extreme Muslims, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like you know, where they're like, in their opinion, like if you're not a Muslim, you have to die, right? Like we're talking about far out, you know, like Osama bin Laden. Like, man, how can we? It's very hard now when you to have that loving kindness for Osama bin Laden, right? But that's what we have to try to do, or for Hitler, right? We have to try to find some loving kindness for someone, and that is what you're talking about, correct?
Okay, you know, but let's clarify. Let's clarify how this works.
Right.
So, for example, if we have relationships that are harmful and hurtful, it doesn't mean that we need to subject ourselves to mistreatment or harm. So we can love and respect people, but we also have to protect ourselves. That's very important. We have a stewardship to protect ourselves and to protect those around us. And so we should be prudent in protecting ourselves and yet maintaining respect for other people. This gets to be a hard thing, especially when sometimes there are people that want to hurt you, and so you have to take steps to protect yourself. It's just like in a family relationship. If you have a family relationship where one party has become abusive, okay, what do? Do you continue to subject yourself to that treatment? No, of course you don't. You've got to remove yourself from a toxic relationship, from a destructive or abusive relationship. Can you still forgive the person? Can you still love the person? Yes, you can. but you don't continue to take the punishment and the abuse. That's not required.
Okay, let me try this a different way. And I'm just trying to slightly play devil's advocate a little bit with you, like just to keep the conversation. Because I don't disagree with you at all, but I'm just trying to like get through this like psychological piece of it.
Yeah, it's
of
hard.
Like this idea of disagreement and how we can do it better as a society.
Right.
So for example, I have these 3 friends, Scott, Cody, and Vinny. They're my homies, and they are very religious. I am not. And like they can bust my balls. Right. And they're like, motherfucker, you're going to burn in hell because they're Christians, you know? And I'm like, man, you motherfuckers are crazy. You know, I'm not burning in hell. Fuck you. Right. Like, so this is how we can, you know, because I don't believe in it. They do. How do we take that disagreement? But we're homies. We're friends.
Yeah.
Right. So we can get by it because we have all this other stuff that we love each other about. Take the friendship out. When someone's belief is so terrible about us and what's going to happen, like, you know, when you go back to like the gay people and sinning, for example, right. And like that they're going to burn in hell. And the 2 people and the one person saying it is not friends with the other person that they're saying it to or about. Like that for both people now. And I'm not saying one person's right or wrong, but because they each have a perspective. How do we stop hating each other in those instances?
It gets hard.
It gets real hard.
It gets really, really hard. But here's the thing. So this gets to the principle of forgiveness, which is very, very important to understand. Even when people hurt us, if we don't forgive them, and by forgiveness, I mean to let it go. If we don't forgive them, then we retain the hurt and the poison of that experience. That's a corroding influence in our hearts. So even though we've been hurt, we have to let that go. Otherwise, it hurts us and we carry a big backpack around for the rest of our lives, right? We, with the wrongs that people have committed against us, let it go.
So
you have to let it go. Otherwise, you're going to carry that around. Now, this happens to all of us at one point or another where we have been unjustly dealt with by other people. And it's deeply, deeply painful. And so there comes a point where we have to ask ourselves, am I going to carry that with me or am I going to let it go? With the recognition that there is no justice right now. There is no equity, and I have been unfairly treated. I have been exploited. This does happen in life. The best therapy is to let it go because you can't carry that poison with you. Very, very important.
How do we have big change like Martin Luther King and the Civil Rights Movement? Because sometimes you right? Because I know I'm asking kind of shitty questions. I don't know. Maybe sorry. Right? Because he couldn't just let it go. Right? Like, there had to be change.
There had to be change, and so his agenda needed to go forward. And that's not what we're talking about. We're not talking about abdication. Okay. We're not talking about giving up on a cause that is worthy and where we need perhaps social change. So we're not talking about that. We're talking about letting the personal hurt go in the process so that you can continue to find happiness in life and make progress with the things that are important because the change is still needed. So we're not going to abdicate those things that need to happen. We're not going to stop our efforts. Okay, I know it took us 20 minutes, but you got it. Sorry. That was for me, that was really great, man, because I wanted to hear it got on such a the difference between forgiving the person but not abdicating I can't say the word, sorry, to their philosophy, understanding that we still have to keep marching. Like that, sure. That's where the differences are. That's the line that we have to be drawing. That, man, if we get nothing else out of this, I guess I'm hang up, we're done. No. So, man, that was very that was really interesting to go through. Thanks, man. Sure. Sure.
So, what else is it that you do now currently, right? Like you are a leadership consultant. How do you help teams? Like what are some of the things that you do?
Well, I do work with executive teams, lots of teams across industries and government, healthcare, education. And right now, the big focus is to help the teams elevate their level of psychological safety. And the reason, Elliot, that this has become such an important issue and there's so much momentum behind it is because, on the one hand, there's an ethical force in organizations that is at work and that is putting more pressure on leaders than ever before to create psychologically safe organizations. Let me tell you why. And I think your listeners will find this very important. In the past, for many, many years, perhaps centuries, we have in organizations, we have often treated each other poorly, and we have normalized that behavior. We have, so just think about, I mean, just in my lifetime, in my professional lifetime, I have seen this with my own eyes, where we have normalized bullying behavior. We have normalized harassment. We have normalized public shaming. We have normalized manipulation. When we normalize it in organizations, you look around and people say, oh, that's just how we do things. What's happening now is a sea change where the millennials are pouring into the workforce and they're saying, hang on a second, time out. I'm not doing that. I expect a work environment or an organization that provides psychological safety as a threshold requirement. So if you don't offer that, I'm gone. Adios. So the ethical force, Elliot, at work in organizations today on this issue is beyond anything that I have ever seen before. And this is a good thing. This needs to happen because it really is a moral responsibility that we provide that to each other. But it is astonishing when we look back and we think, oh, look what we allowed. Look what we normalized. Look what we tolerated. Can you believe this? So that ethical force is just, it's just stronger than it's ever been. So that's one side of it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. You said a very hot button word, though, millennials. Yeah. Because when everyone, look, my business is filled with millennials, filled with them. Millennials run my business and they fucking crush it. Like I have no clue what people are talking about when they talk about like the hatred that people have for millennials because they do great work. You just have to show them, some kindness and love, you know? But when a lot of people think about millennials, they think about no scoreboards, right? They think like as children, right? Like,
no scoreboards. Everybody gets a trophy. Entitlement.
Which I think I disagree with. I don't know about you. Do you I mean, I think we should have scoreboards. My kids do much better with scoreboards.
Well, I do too. I mean, I grew up in locker rooms. Right. And the reality is that we also need to teach accountability, and that's where we have fallen short in many instances. We're not teaching accountability, and we're not holding ourselves accountable for our behavior and our results, and that is vitally important. You're never going to be happy in life if you're not producing real results, right? It's not possible. You've got to be able to deliver real results in order to find deep satisfaction in what you're doing. That's the bottom line. So we need to teach accountability. We need to teach collaboration. We need to teach disagreement. Now, let me go to the other part. Okay, this is the other part. This is very important. So I talked about the moral force that is affecting organizations. The other force is the competitive force. The competitive force says that you are not going to be able to survive unless you are providing something to the market that's competitive. So you're going to need to innovate. What does it take to innovate? This is very interesting. The biggest barrier to innovation across organizations is culture. Number one. That's your biggest barrier. And as we look inside, as we try to deconstruct this, what is it about culture that's getting in the way? It's a lack of psychological safety. When you innovate, by definition, you're disrupting the status quo. So you need a culture that allows people to be safe when they challenge the status quo. When they say, you know what, I think something needs to change here, or I've got a better idea here, or why are we doing it this way? The organization needs to give its members a license to innovate, a tolerance for candor. So here's the way that I frame it. The leader's job is to increase intellectual friction, and at the same time, decrease social friction. Now, you got to think about that for a minute.
That's tough. That's really hard.
It is tough, but that's what organizations that need to innovate, that's what they have to do. Because where does innovation come from? It comes from creative abrasion. It comes from constructive dissent. It comes from ideas that are colliding. That is intellectual friction. We have to have that. That's how we innovate. That's how we create solutions. That's how we solve problems. But what normally happens, right, is when you have high intellectual friction, it tends to create social friction too, because we're sensitive as human beings. So the great leader.
No, come on, we're tough men.
We're pretty sensitive.
I agree. I am a sensitive Sally.
Right. So the very skilled leader is going to nurture that intellectual friction, and it's going to go up. And at the same time, manage that social friction down. If you can do that as a leader, you are truly world class. That's what the best do. So that's what I spend my time doing with teams.
I think we do it in such different ways, because I do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, like that. Those are my businesses where we fight, man. Right? Like we're fighting each other. We're on the mat. I'm trying to strangle you and you're trying to strangle me, and we're doing it together.
Yes.
And it's all friction, right?
Yes.
The whole thing is friction.
Yes. But Elliot,
I love you. I love you. And you love me.
But in your Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, you have terms of engagement.
Yeah. Yes.
You have rules.
Yes.
And there's a code that you have to abide by, because you're maintaining the respect and the dignity even in the combat. That's what we're talking about.
Yeah,
intellectual friction goes up,
cool.
social friction goes down. You do that in jiu-jitsu. There's still you don't lose that mutual respect.
No, we're gonna hug afterwards.
That's right.
Right, like the 7 minutes or whatever the round is, we're gonna someone's going to die from the choke, right? Because you tap out.
He's going to tap out, and then he's going to give you a hug.
And then we're going to give each other a hug and be like, man, that was great. Can you show me how you did that?
That's right. Yeah, that's what we're talking about in organizations. What we're talking about. That's just a great metaphor.
Right.
Jiu-jitsu is a great metaphor. That's exactly what we have to do in the political arena, in the business arena, in the social arena. Whatever the issues are, we have to be able to engage in healthy, productive, respectful ways.
We're about to not
do.
Go ahead, sorry. We're about to not do it with these two choices we're about to get. Again, going back to the political, how are we going to get away from this, right? Because Trump's going to get out there. He's going to call him Crazy Joe and Delusional Joe, and then Joe's going to bite back, right? And one of those two guys, who cares who it is? I mean. If the stock market keeps going down, it might be Biden, right? But one of those two guys is going to win. Mm-hmm. And then the next person that comes up, I don't care whoever the next two are, they're going to do the same thing. How do we get out of this cycle? Because those are the people that we're looking at.
True.
Right? How are we going to leave this cycle? Is that generation just going to have to die off, or what's going to happen?
Well, I think first of all, we have to back up, Elliot, and we have to take some accountability here. We have to acknowledge that these are the people, these are the leaders that we have voted into office. These are the leaders that we have promoted. So somewhere along the line, we have to take responsibility because this is the output of our process. And this is a democratic process. So I think we need to go back. We need to do a little soul searching, and we need to ask ourselves, what have we done perhaps that's been misguided to get to this place? Because the modern world is complex and we have a lot of problems and a lot of challenges. But my goodness, if we can't engage the way that you engage in jujitsu, we're not gonna do well, right? We are creating self-inflicted wounds, and we're having unintended consequences from this. So I think we need to go back and do some soul searching, and we need to get the hate out, the vitriol out, this kind of dialogue. It has no place. This is not this is not what the United States of America was built on. From day one, we've had marvelous disagreements about everything, and that will continue. We have to be able to get back to that ability to disagree, to engage, to have that tolerance for candor that we need, but we've got to be able to maintain the dignity and the respect. That's my opinion.
Last time I checked, I don't agree with myself most of the time.
Yeah.
I disagree. Shit, and I was wrong about that one. Yeah, right. But we forgive. I don't know if we do forgive ourselves. It's a good question. I don't think most of us do. Like when we're wrong, I think most of us probably we let it go, but we beat ourselves up about it a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
In some way, right? In some way, by either being mean to somebody else or getting depressed about ourselves, right? Like, so how do we deal with ourselves? Like, I'm a person that experiences really acute and intense anxiety.
Okay,
like, it can really, really suck, right? So how do we free ourselves of some of those sufferings? Because we are living in a world of great anxiety and depression right now.
We are. I would say this, that we have to realize that there's tyranny at the extremes. Any extreme becomes destructive. And so as we are living our lives, as we're making decisions, we have to be very, very careful that we are not being influenced by fear on one end, selfishness or arrogance on the other, because those extremes are very, very hazardous to us. They're hazardous as members of families, communities, organizations. We've got to be very careful to stay away from those extremes. That's why we say there's tyranny at the extreme. It's not helpful. So I would advocate for more humility, because here's what we know about ourselves as humans. We are ignorant in many ways, and we all fall short in our knowledge, in our skills, in our aptitudes, in our competencies. There's a lot we don't know. We need to acknowledge, number one, that we're ignorant. Number two, that we're interdependent. This is true for all of us. And when we come to that realization, it really does bring a spirit of humility into our lives. And then again, what does that do? It changes our behavior. And it softens us up. So when we go through suffering, when we go through the adversities of life, we have a choice about how to respond. And normally what we see is that some people harden and others soften. And it's quite interesting. You can see people that have gone through very similar experiences, but they come out on the other end, and some are hard and some are soft. Well, what accounts for the difference? Well, it's the response. It's the way that not only you traveled through that adversity, but the way the adversity traveled through you. How did that adversity travel through you? And what's the state of your heart that makes all the difference in the world.
Man, Tim, I really appreciate what you're saying here. It's really kind of beautiful. You know, it's so touching, and the interdependence piece, right? Like, I can't exist without you, and you can't exist without me. And if we don't do it well, then we're a little screwed.
I think so. I think that we all go through periods of great suffering and adversity in life. We all go through our crucibles of affliction. The question is, what are we getting out of it? Is it refining our character? I think that's really what we're after. Is it refining our character? Have we become better human beings? Do we have more empathy and compassion for those around us, even for those who may have hurt us, even for those who don't apologize, even for those who are acting in willful blindness, and even for those who are unethical and exploiting others. Now, again, as I said before, we need to protect ourselves in smart and prudent ways. But I think the point of having these tough experiences in life is that we become more refined as human beings. I think it was Clayton Christensen who passed away just a few days ago, and a man that I admire greatly. He said, teach your children when they're in high school to do hard things. And that counsel has stayed with me, because I look at our children, my wife Tracy and I, we have sons and daughters, and you know the old maxim that says, are you going to prepare the road for the child, or the child for the road?
Yeah, I love that.
And so we can't there's too much coddling going on in some cases. There's too much neglect going on in some other cases. And then in a third category, we have some parents that are they're too controlling, they're too authoritarian, and they're not showing enough love. So here's the elusive combination. In our relationships, we need love and we need accountability. And to strike that balance is often very difficult. But that's what we need with each other. We need the love and accountability, and we need the humility so that we can apologize when we make mistakes.
Man, it was really interesting what you just said there with the parenting thing. Because my 10-year-old, the other day we were walking back from somewhere, I don't know where we were. And he goes, hey, Dad, can you do me a favor? And I was like, yeah, dude, what's up? I'll do anything for you pretty much. You know? And he was like, so, like the dishes. Rather than tell me that I have to do the dishes right now, can you just say, hey, Kanan, the dishes need to be done by 9. And then let me see if I can actually do it. And like structure my day so that, or my hour so that, you know, all right, I might brush my teeth. I might go to the bathroom. I might read my book for a little bit, but I know that the work has to get done. And he said, it's like more like a kid, you know, and I'll get it and I'll do it. And I thought that was so interesting because he was asking for that, right? He wasn't asking to not do the dishes.
That's right.
And he wasn't asking to do them like, you know, at 11 o'clock at night when it's bedtime. He was asking to like be able to manage himself with a little bit of help from me. We're like, sure, when they're 5, it's like, hey, dude, we got to go do the dishes.
That's right.
Right. But when they're 10,
yeah,
go ahead. Sorry.
So let me comment on this because let's overlay the 4 stages of psychological safety framework on that, because you just gave a case study example of what we call contributor safety. Contributor safety means that you can contribute as a member of the team using your skills and your abilities to make a difference with autonomy without the fear of being embarrassed or marginalized or punished in some way. So what was your son asking for? He's saying, Dad, I'll do the dishes, but let me do it my way. I need some autonomy. Yes, I want your encouragement. Yes, I want your guidance. But you know what? Give me some latitude. Give me some some rope. Give me some autonomy to do this. That's what I want. And increasingly, so think about parenting. Parenting is essentially the transfer of ownership. And if you have a child that's that is taking ownership and just asking for a little bit more autonomy, beautiful. That's
right.
Beautiful. You must be doing something right, Elliot, for him to respond that way. So congratulations.
I just got lucky, man. He popped out pretty solid. So,
fantastic.
Yeah. So, we're going to wrap up here, but I got 2 questions for you real fast before we do, or 1 question,
Sure.
1 statement. So, you and I are probably different generations, right? Different genres a little bit. I'm this guy over here that's a fighter and yada yada. I don't have the hugest platform. What was it that made you say yes to coming on my show? Like why, because you have a lot of shows you could go on. I'm sure you say no to a bunch.
My perception was, as I evaluated your show, is that you are sincere and that you have good and pure motives. Now, that means a lot to me, Elliot, because here's why. Human beings have a natural ability to detect intent in other people. You don't need to go to school to learn that. We all, right. we can sense intent in others. And so if you don't have good intent, if your motives aren't pure, you don't pass the smell test. And so just for me, honestly, to answer that question, I felt that you passed the smell test. I felt that this is a man that has good intent and he's trying to do good in the world. I can sign up for that.
I appreciate it. Yeah. I'm looking for you on the same thing, right? Like I'm the guy who's right. Like who's passing the smell test? Like, let me go check this out,
Yeah. Yeah.
And see, cause I have a team that does this, that helps me find people,
Yeah.
I for sure don't approve everybody,
right?
I'm like,
thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, not that guy. But man, I really appreciate it. I know, if I sounded a little disagreeable, sometimes that wasn't my intent. I just like your ideas were so interesting to me. I wanted to dive in a little more I don't know. I hope I wasn't too confrontational.
Not at all. Not at all.
Okay. I really enjoyed the conversation.
Because see, one of the principles that we teach with teams is tolerance for candor.
Right.
We need the tolerance for candor. And so I appreciate that. And I support that. We need that kind of environment.
I appreciate it. And the only reason I say that is because I had one of my fighters on, a very famous fighter, Alistair Overeem, who multiple time world champion in many different disciplines of the martial arts. And he has experienced some of the greatest losses you have ever seen. Right? I mean, devastating losses. And I have never seen someone in my whole life take them, especially in the fighting world, right? Because it's not like putting a ball in a hoop. Like you get destroyed in front of millions and millions of people, and he's able to just come back and put, and I was asking him and challenging him how he is able to do this. And he and I had a great conversation about it, but all of the feedback I get from it is you piece of shit. How could you talk to Alistair like that? And, and I'm like, and then like, I had to go back and ask him when we were done, like, yo, dude, did you find me disrespectful? And he was like, no, not at all. Why? And he's like, why are you even asking? But because sometimes it's very interesting how the public perceives it. And I was hoping that you didn't perceive me as difficult and challenging or disagreeable. So
not at all. Not at all.
I really enjoyed it. So
likewise.
Let's close it up. I'll close it up here. And then when I close it, just don't hang up and then we'll talk.
Sure.
So, man, I greatly appreciated it. And that was the piece there for me, Tim, about when you were talking about like, you have to have forgiveness, but not objectivity was amazing. So that was really great. Where can everybody reach out to you?
Sure. Our website is leaderfactor.com. And I'm also on LinkedIn. I'm also on Twitter. So reach out and love to hear from you.
All right, guys, that's it. Tim Clark, really appreciate it, man. And you guys know how this rolls. Every day you go out there and you find your power, right? We all have this unique ability, not special. Your mom's lied to you. No one is special. We are all very, very unique, and your power is within you. So go out there and find your power, everyone. Thank you all very much.